professional. Hej och välkomna till kvällens föreläsning med Paul Davis. Idag har vi anordnat 2 föreläsningar med honom och det här är dagens andra föreläsning. Och den riktar sig lite mer åt elit, semiprofessionella tränare, men vi har även rekommenderat styrelser att vara med för att kunna få större förståelse för hur det är att vara tränare och vad riskerna och riskerna är och vart stressen kommer ifrån och hur man kan hjälpa tränare att minska den risken och stressen för utbrändhet. Under dagen då vi även sänder den här föreläsningen live under kvällen, så om ni har frågor så skicka in dem via Mentimeter. Här har ni koden och QR-koden. QR-koden kommer även finnas kvar för er som är på sändning i det nedersta hörnet på sändningen. Dagens schema, nu lite intro och info. Sen tar Paul Davis över och jag tror att jag kommer ihåg att flagga för det i inbjudan, men han pratar engelska. Men det går bra att ställa frågor på svenska, då han förstår svenska. 18:45 ungefär så har vi fika, sen har vi lite mer tid med Paul och sen öppnar vi upp för frågor och diskussion och dialog helt enkelt. Sen sammanfattar vi kvällen och sen får vi tacka för oss. Så nu ska Paul få ta över och så önskar jag er en trevlig föreläsning.
Tackar.
You, Paul.
Yes, I'll do quick introduction, I suppose, as I hand over and do the technical reconnection. I'm professor of psychology at Umeå University. So I'm based in the psychology department, and that is a lot of my background and credentials, but I've also have a history in applied sport. I identify as a failed elite athlete, which as it failed, I try and now figure out where it all went wrong. So that's why I do the psychology part. My sport was rugby, and I played that to a high level with the national junior program, development program, until the concussions literally kicked me out. Also, I played squash to a high level, and typically those who win, if you can't, you start to change over to become a coach. So I did a lot of coaching as well. High level of credentials there. And what I found is that a lot of the psychology that I teach is always driven by the key question of application. So hopefully today, what I talk about, you'll be able to use in your work as well, in different aspects of work. Because that's one key thing that I do is that it's not just sports psychology, it's generally performance psychology. And performance, I've worked with a whole range of people, whether it's from emergency services, the military, police education currently, as well as performing arts, DJs, dance, these sort of things as well. It's all performance, and it all comes down to how we make best use of our psychological skills to make the most of our physical capabilities as well. All right, so today I'm going to have an interactive session with you that are here, so you're warned. Yes, you'll have to do the heavy lifting for everyone. So what I want to do is start by using a few different examples to get you thinking about a little bit of stress. So if you're getting stressed about thinking you're going to be stressed, don't get too stressed. So there'll be a little stress, but a fun stress, hopefully. All right? And that's how we will talk about making stress, perhaps reframing it and adapting it to enhance performance rather than diminish our capabilities as well. So let's start with the first task. And like I said, real world examples. I am going to show you a list. This is your typical to-do list as an elite level coach, a sport administrator, or somebody who has just lots of things going on in their life. All right? Don't worry, I have attempted to skriva på svenska, so all the tasks are translated to Swedish. Don't get hung up if my grammar is not great. Don't worry, I have 3 teenage boys at home that tell me when my grammar is not great på svenska, so it's a work in progress. But I'm going to give you 20 seconds to remember as many as possible, And then on your piece of paper in front of you, I want you to write as many as you can, as accurately you can, in a time span of 1 minute. All right? I'll show you the list. You have 20 seconds to remember as many as you can, and then another minute, or even as you're using the 20 seconds after. So yeah, start writing after I take them away. You can write the list. 20 seconds to look at it, 1 minute to write it. Redo? Klara? Färdiga? Go? Tre, två, ett, nu. You may write. No cheating by taking pictures. I saw that. Yeah. Write down as many as you remember. I'll give you a full minute. I gave you 30 seconds to remember because I heard the ooh. So. Tre, två, ett, slut. Okay? All right, turn over your piece of paper. And on a scale of 1, very poorly, to 5, fantastic, how well do you think you performed? 1, very bad. 5, I think I got them all written down. 1s, 2s, 1s, 2s. Okay, no problem. That's fine. That's good. We'll try and see if we can enhance it in certain ways. But now we're going to make it even more challenging and see if you are. Mastra, okay? So don't worry, we're not going to do the hunter's pose for too long, see who wins on that. We are going to do a reaction time, okay? But we are going to play with pens. And now we are going to play in teams. So if we could have, I guess, we'll have 2 teams, a 3 and a 2, and one of you go twice? Okay. Sure, yes, 3 versus 2, one does twice, or I could, but yeah. 2 versus 2, are you ducking out? Yes. Oh, okay, this is part of the psychological test as well. Yeah, that says something. All right, you can line up. One team, you two, if you could be on this side, please. And if you two can be on this side, please. Okay, so like the game, what I would like you to do is put your hands on the table, and I'll say på svenska, blow. And you are trying to beat the other team. Yeah. Okay? Then the aim of the game is we'll play a few rounds, seeing as we're quite few. What I want you to now do is after, if you have grabbed the tool, then what I want you to do is you will write down one of the things that you were just asked to remember. And we are going to now see if you can remember the list and play this game at the same time.
Without looking at my sheet note?
Without looking at your notes. Okay? Whichever team grabs it, they get the opportunity to write one of the points from the list down. Okay? Yeah. Whichever team gets the most out of, we'll play 3 rounds perhaps. Yeah.
So we start a new blank.
You start your own new blank list. Yes, exactly.
Having we one together.
Exactly. Yes, you will combine your efforts. Yes. Okay.
It's only one here at the time.
Exact. Yes. Yeah. So pick who's first, and then I'll say Redo, Grön, and then I would get to write one down. And then you get to write one of the items down, and we're going to count up which team can get the most. Redo. Rud. Oh, close. We'll call that a practice. We'll call it a practice. I was going to punish you and say the other team gets to write down, but we'll have one more practice. Redo. Blow. Oh, too quick, yes. So that's one for you. You may write down one of the points on the list. Svart. Yes. Oh, was my pronunciation no good? Blow. Everyone but one. Yeah. You can only grab the one.
25% chance.
No, you only grab the one. There will be a penalty next time. If you grab the wrong one or knock it over.
25% chance that I get it right. Just grab one.
Rud. Okay, okay, oh, okay. Okay, for the color. You go for the color I say. Grön. A split. You may each write one down. You may each write one down. Yes. New. Okay. Oh, yeah. Blow. Oh. With Ian.
Vi kör igen.
Ian. Grön. Okay, we'll each have one more. Svart. Oh, bra jobbat. Okay, well done. And one more last round. Yes. Rud. Okay. Bra, yes. Okay, and I was going to play, I think we'll skip the next level of challenge, to be fair. Because what I would have done next, unless you really are keen, we play the same game, but you play it from a plank position. You play the same grab from a plank. You came dressed ready to go. You're ready. Do you want to have a go? Yeah. Okay, bra. Yeah, perfect. Okay, I think we have room here. You said, no, I'm in the camera. That was very, yeah.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
You're supposed to grab it without falling down.
No, you can fall. Okay. Sacrifice the body. Yes. Redo. Grön. Oh, claro. Yeah, bra jobbat. That's, add to your list. Yes. Same thing. Redo. No, same list. Blow. Yeah, absolute. So, one.
Ska vi fortsätta på?
Grön. Oh, bra.
I only want to do it from the plank.
Yes, absolutely.
Not as many rounds.
No, we will do one more each. Righto. Blow. Okay, one more. That's good. Last one. Yep, okay. Righto. Rud. Oh, ja. Bra jobbat. Bra jobbat, bra tävling. Yes.
Jag känner också att de första hade jag på höger sida, vilket underlättade för mig.
Okay, so you can add to your list. And what I would like you to do is pass your list to the other team, and they will correct how many that you got correct. Check how many you got correct. And so I had better show you the list again.
Ja, just det. Ja. Ja. Och kom ihåg att sen ska visa på fel person.
Okay, how many did they get? Are they all correct?
Yes. It depends on how much they needed to.
Right, yes, yes, but
Collect kids, yes.
yes, okay. That I partly put in the time because I've left my kids there a little late. Okay, so Hurmonga? Three. How many? Five. All right, so you are the winners. Okay, draw your back. And we, in the break, we'll add up how many you did individually on your own, and there will be a winner for that as well. You can add those up, all right? Okay, so the point to that was looking at your combined cognitive and physical performance under pressure, okay? So when you did it the first round, there was just pure cognitive tasks. How many things can you remember? When I asked you to do it in a team versus situation, it became the pressure part, where you were racing, dual tasking with the decision making, and secondary tasking trying to remember the words, all right? And then when I introduced the plank part of the competition, it brought in a physical stress as well, okay? So the point to that, and hopefully even in terms of the items on your list, hopefully there were a couple of those items that you recognized, yes, actually on the way home, I have to buy some milk, these sort of things. Or in your daily activities, I did try and pick some of the activities that an elite level coach or a sport administrator might have to do as their daily activities. But hopefully then, you recognize that, okay, it's not that unrecognizable, this level of demand that we have placed on ourselves every day that we have to meet. Interestingly though, and I've talked about, is that each one of these quadrants influence each other. So when you feel stress, when you feel the emotion, your heart rate changes. You start to think about how important is it that I perform? If I'm successful, will I feel good? If I make a mistake, what's that going to cost me in a certain way? Am I performing for myself, or do I have a teammate who's counting on me as well? Am I trying to support my teammate as they're doing the activities as well? So this is something to think about, and I do a really holistic approach when I work with athletes, or as I was saying, other professions as well, to think about if I had left you in the plank position for 4 minutes, and then I asked you to do the grabbing, how would that have impacted on either your performance and decision making or remembering as you got more fatigued? Because that's an area that we've been looking at in research, is how does either physical fatigue influence our cognitive performance, or even cognitive fatigue? You can be mentally tired. At the end of a day where you've made lots of decisions, you then come home to your family, and then your child tells you, oh, Mom, I need a new pair of shoes for tomorrow's physical education lesson. Your ability to regulate your emotions in that moment is a lot more difficult when you are fatigued. Or similarly, a long day in the office, you go to training that evening, or a competition, a match, the referee makes a bad call. Usually you can regulate your own emotions, but today was a tough day. I'm tired, I'm fatigued. You don't have as good control, self-regulation in that sense. And just to highlight that, we have an evidence base relating to that. So this is research I published a couple of years ago from Centrum for Idrottsforskning funding, where we looked at how the dual task performance related to our affect, our emotions, and the level of work rate that we were doing. And this was with elite level orienteers at our competence centrum at Umeå University. So should we quickly see if we have any elite orienteers in the room? Don't worry, I won't put you on the bike and do it as well. But basically what we did was we did a cycling time trial, cycle as far as you can in 15 minutes, and we had them doing repeated cognitive tests. And do we have any orienteers in the room? The point of actually our task is that these are symbols on the orienteering map, if you did it at school, all right? And so with this cognitive task, you had to remember each one is a screen when you see it displayed. You have to remember, is this the image I saw 2 pictures ago? So here it's not, I haven't seen another one. Here, no, it's not, I haven't seen one. Here, is this the same one as here? No, it's not. Here, did I see it 2 ago? Yes, that's the correct answer. Did I see this one here? No, is the correct answer. Okay, don't worry, I won't ask you to do that one. It is tricky when you're tired. But this one, which color is the shortest distance from here to the goal, not the purple. The purple's as direct. So orange, blue, red. How many people say orange is the shortest distance? How many say blue is the shortest distance? Blue. How many say red? No? Okay. The correct answer is blue, actually. Our orienteers were able to do this in less than 5 seconds, just as they were riding, in that sense. We did one trial where all they did was sit on the bike, not pedal, and do the cognitive tests. They did one where they were cycling as they did the cognitive tests, and they did just one cycling task as well. Okay? So I'll give you one more. This is called a keep track. So it's good to know where you are when you're orienteering. These 2 balls are going to move. The next screen is going to show an arrow, and it's going to say, there's this line still going to be there. It's going to say an arrow this way, or one arrow this way or that way, saying which way that one ball has moved. Förstår? So the next picture will be an arrow. It will indicate either this ball or this ball, depending on if the arrow is here or if it is here, and it will point the direction that the ball has moved. Okay? Next screen will be one arrow telling you which ball has moved. So, ready? So there, it's the top ball that's moved. Yes? Okay? So I'll do it the prep. So that's what you're going to see next. And there's going to be 4 movements, and it will ask you, is the ball in the correct place after? Okay? So you know where they are? Remember where they are? Moved 1 space. Moved 1 space. Moved 1 space. Moved 1 space. Is that ball in the correct place that the arrows told us that it should have moved? Yes, you're saying yes. The correct answer is yes, it is. Okay? So like I said, this is a keep track task that we did with our orienteers. And if you're interested, you can put your phone and that will actually take you to the paper that you can read. But the interesting thing here is that actually even as they were cycling, they didn't perform worse. That actually didn't distract them, the heavy physiological task, because they were racing as fast as they could. What it actually did was improved their performance by shortening their reaction time. They made all their answers still as accurately, but they did it even quicker because there was an activation through the cycling is what our hypothesis is, okay? So in that sense, stress, physiological activation, was good for performance. But the question is, when we work in high performance environments, under high loads, high demands, it feels like we're always at a high volume. Life with the volume turned up to where it's past the point that it's good for us. So the question is then, what happens if you are having to work high intensity for too long? Well, if you stand in front of loud music for too long, it's going to blow you away in that sense. It's going to lead to what we would call is burnout. Anybody recognize the old movie? Back to the Future, the first one. Yes, I'd say people in the room, we might remember it as a yes, okay. So in the research though, it helps us to be able to identify what is stressing us. What are the potential sources of stress? And so we've looked at this predominantly with athletes, which is something to keep in mind, but it also applies to coaches or other performance aspects within sport. So obviously, just competing, the tevling, that trying to beat your opponent, it can be considered a level of stress. When you show up there, will I win? Will I lose? Have I trained enough? That is an aspect of a stressful situation. Organizational factors are all the surrounding elements that get you to the competition. Have I had a direct flight off of the island to get me to the match to compete, or do I have to take the ferry, wait for a train, wait for another plane, those sort of things? Who's booking the travel? That's an organizational factor as well. Is my Förening choosing the right competitions? Am I trying to make the national team? All of these aspects about which competitions should I choose to get selected would be an organizational factor as well. And then athletes and coaches are people too. They have relationships, hopefully, outside of sport. They have a family of some nature. They have perhaps educational or other demands in their life. That can be another source of stress as well. Similarly, we most often think of social support coming from assistant coaches that we might be working with. Parents, we hope, are going to be a support for the athlete or for the coaches as well. And perhaps in terms of organizational factors, the performance directors, the Enhetten, the chef, those sort of things as well, okay? But what's interesting is that all of these factors can either be a stress or they can be a support depending on your perspective, okay? So this is Prince William sending a message to the media, and you can interpret what probably he feels like to the media. But actually what he's telling you is that he now has 3 children that he's taking home. So the symbol he's sending here, you look at it from another angle, the exact same picture, different angle, tells a very different story about the situation, all right? So it's all about perspective when it comes to how we interpret stressful situations. Oh, yes. Oh, thank you. Yes. Yes, it proves the point that way. Yes. Okay. So when it comes here, we can interpret a stressful situation either as it's a challenge. It could be my time to shine. It could be my opportunity to show what I am capable of. And I will see it as a challenge if I have enough resources, enough within me to meet the demands of the situation. Okay? So if we think about it here, I have enough resources. That's the heavy end. The demands will be outweighed by my resources. It's a challenge. I'm up for this. It will be a threat to us, to our self-identity, to how I feel about my self-worth. If I don't have enough resources, I am not up for this difficult circumstance. I see this as a threat to me. It's going to damage my self-worth. I'm not going to think well of myself if the demands are too heavy and the resources are not enough in that circumstance. All right? So that is the balance of the challenge and the threat. What leads us to make that evaluation to determine our perspective is our self-efficacy, and that's our self-confidence. Do I believe in myself? Do I believe from past experience, from what other people tell me, from telling myself, can I see other people have done it? Do I believe that I can do this? I have the resources. It relates to my sense of autonomy, or how much I can influence the outcome. So if I don't have any control about this, because I've got a bad ref and they're not going against me, I have no control over the outcome or anything like that, then I'm going to think of this as I don't have another resource. Or if I am chosen, if I don't have the autonomy to choose who I'm playing against, and that sort of idea. Or the other aspect is, have I set an approach goal or an avoidance goal? Approach goal is, most basic terms, I'm trying to win. Avoidance goal, I don't want to lose. Okay? This is, I want to do my best, I just don't want to be last in that sense. So avoid looking bad, approach looking good in the sort of way there. And that's going to influence our interpretation, our perspective on the stressful situation. All of that will have a knock-on effect to how our body responds and how our mind thinks. If it's a challenge, my body readies itself. It's activated. So we have increased heart rate. We have breath response ready to go, to run, to do our best. Our psychological thoughts are thinking about all the ways that we can beat the challenging situation. We are looking for solutions. We are looking to make the most of what we have, how we will feel when we win. If we're in a threat perspective, we will have increased physiological arousal, but we'll interpret that to be nervousness. So we will have butterflies in our stomach, and they will just be all over the place, and we'll feel upset when we feel threatened. The cliche, when you feel challenged, that's when you have butterflies in your stomach, but they're flying in formation. They are like ducks that are going in the, heading south, working together. So you just need to get the challenge where you use the energy there. That's an indicator that I'm up for this. Similarly, psychologically, I'm thinking about, in a threat situation, how bad it will feel when I fail. Thinking about all the different ways that I could fail. Thinking about all of the weaknesses in my teammates and all of that. Your mind goes to that direction, looking for all of the bad circumstances. And this has then a knock-on effect to how we perform. But in the long term, and it could be basic in terms of optimist and a pessimist, in their long-term outlook, how they relate in terms of any sort of cardiovascular disease, opportunities in life, trying new challenges, those sort of things as well, which will also relate to more social aspects of relationships and things like that as well. Fearful of getting hurt in a relationship versus an opportunity to meet somebody new. That can be the difference between challenge and threat relating to perspective. And so this, again, our evidence base is we've looked at, in the Alpine Gymnasium, we've looked at some of the athletes, how they perceive the stressors. And what we find then, that even when they have the dual career of trying to make the Landslaget, when they're trying to do well at the gymnasium to go on to a universitet where they want, they often, within these Alpine Gymnasiums that we studied, they had the resources in place so that their stress adaptation was positive, that they actually were up for the challenge. They didn't see all the competitions as threats. They saw their family and their partners that were lived away, they saw them as a support rather than as a strain of, oh, I'm away from them and that sort of thing as well. So the perception of the stressful circumstances based on the demands and the resources influenced whether or not they took the stress as a challenge or if they perceived it as a threat. So that was the research that we saw there. Should we take a little pause?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, you can get your water after the workouts you've had. All right? So a few minutes, however long you want there, Karo.
Nu tar vi en 15 minuters paus och sen är vi tillbaka.
Righto? Okay, and we're back. Yes, so what we were talking about so far is that when we experience intense emotions, when we experience stress, the body responds. It sometimes, even before we're aware of it, even before we can think about it, the body is already preparing itself in an evolutionary sort of route in terms of how to deal with the situation. And so what we can see here is we've talked about how it's interconnected between how we interpret and perceive the situation, which then can also relate to our emotional state, our physiology, and actually, interestingly, for every emotion that we have, there is a relational appraisal and an action tendency that goes with it. So when I feel angry, the action tendency that I have is to lash out, to strike back, to seek revenge. I'm angry, my appraisal, my thought, somebody has done something against either me or somebody I care about, and the action tendency, the body prepares itself to seek revenge, to action against the target that caused me anger in that sense. So as we see here, this body is highlighted by, this is where people both tell us they feel the emotion, as well as body scans in terms of thermal imaging, heat, activation, blood flow. So as I was saying in terms of anger, somebody makes me angry, clenched fists, I'm ready to lash out in response. When, interestingly, and we see with the basic emotions, when I feel disgusted about something, the body's response is that I'm disgusted, this is something is poisonous to me. Yes, it's noxious, so you hold your breath in that sense. Don't let the poisonous, disgusting element in. Interestingly, more positive, happiness, we see relating to the heart center, happiness in terms of smiling muscle features that way as well. Arms, perhaps in sort of an outward, expression of hug and joy in that sense. Pride, interestingly, as you compare to shame. Shame is the eyes and the cheeks, as you highlight there, the flushing in that sense, but also a coldness, the blue indicating sort of a retract, trying to get small in that sense. All right? Which is why we see in terms of a state of depression, it is a lack of energy. It's a depletion. So red and orange indicates activation, dark blues, etc., relates to feelings of trying to be small in that sense, similar to sadness as you see. Okay? But it's quite interesting when we see the comparisons in terms of the activation. This is what my link in terms of, well, the body is responding to what we think and is going to relate to the behavior, the action that we think is appropriate to these emotions. So that's why it can be quite difficult to not act out on some of our emotions, where it's important to have the regulation relating to that. The other thing to think about as we sort of consider what emotions we have, we are time travelers in our mind. We have a past, we have a future, we have a present, and that will also relate to what kind of emotions that we will have. The emotions, if we think about this from an exercise point of view, and this is research that we've conducted, where we looked at cardiovascular responses, breath rates, we looked at blood lactate, and as well as we looked at ratings of perceived exertion and people's affective states, and we mapped how those changed during a time trial, and they stay quite closely linked together. The other thing that we then looked at, though, we had repeat time trials, so we looked at how people responded to say, how do you feel about the upcoming time trial? How pleasant do you think it's going to be? How unpleasant? Those types of emotions. And we did this in a loop. We did 3 of them. And what we found to be the best predictor of how people felt during the time trial was how they anticipated it would feel. I think it's going to be this way, and there is a self-fulfilling prophecy. It turns out to be that way. We've primed ourselves. But then you ask, okay, where did the anticipation come from? that was mostly influenced by how they remembered the actual event as well. But what's interesting is our memory plays tricks on us. It's not always accurate. What we remember about the activity is it pulls out the most intense part of the experience, the peak, so when it was at its worst or when it was at its best, and how it finished, the end. So we call this the peak and end rule. That's what the research says, okay? And so if I ask you tomorrow, how did you remember doing the plank tonight? You will remember the worst parts and you will remember the finish. So you might remember that we won and you think, actually, it was quite fun. You maybe didn't do so well, or maybe you did do in that well, and you'll remember that way. So if I said to you tomorrow, let's do the plank again, you will anticipate it feeling a certain way based on how you recalled it last time we did it. And this will create a loop, okay? So what the implications for that, just as a side related note, because I think we're all interested, think about how that leads to exercise adherence. How can we get people motivated to do exercise? Well, it's important that they enjoy it, but it's even more important they enjoy the last part. Or they have something during the event that they go, oh yeah, that was one good thing that I remember from the experience. Because all of that will actually overweigh all of the rest of it. They remember the peak, the most intense part, good or bad, and they remember how it finishes. So blasting yourself in the last 30 seconds might not be the smartest way to encourage doing it again in the future that way. Okay? And that sort of relates to our perception of how we anticipate things. So this might be an interesting question based on what we were just talking about. What is your relationship with pain and how do you interpret it? Now, it's good to know that, as even talking about exercise adherence, it's good that we promote people to enjoy it. There's a lot of macho culture that has sort of said, feel the burn, it's got to hurt. If it's not hurting, you're not doing it hard enough. But that is not sustainable. That is pushing it too far for too long. That either causes an injury or causes people not to come back again in that sense. But the other interesting thing to think about is that there is emotional pain and interpretation of pain or of our emotions as well. So that's what we'll talk about, because the body responds very similarly until we can label what that emotion is. And we know that sport is emotional. That's one of the attractions to it. That's why we do it. It gives us the opportunity to care passionately, usually for 90 minutes or whatever, about something that really doesn't matter, okay, in that sense. It's why people can latch on to their sporting team, read the back pages of the newspaper before they read the front page in that sense as well. It can give other aspects of identity and belonging and the emotional exhilaration that you don't find in other parts of life, all right? So the point, though, here is that when we have these intense emotions, it's going to have a physiological response as well. And it's difficult that if here Andy Murray was so ecstatic when he won the Davis Cup at this time, and if you got to see him at the end of the Olympics where he was retiring, the completely other side. There was a lot of sadness. There's a lot of gratitude for what it was and everything as well, but it was a very emotional, intense experience. And that can relate to, it has really become quite cliche now with this as an idea. It's almost a bit of the no pain sort of idea as well. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I have to admit that this was an approach that led me to taking up short track speed skating at a later point in my life when I moved to Wales from Canada, because that's all about exploring how much can you take, putting your body into positions where it is really uncomfortable, but it's also a lot of fun because that's where the speed comes. But this as an indication is indicating when you're doing something meaningful. And actually a lot of this discussion that I'll unpack relates to the idea of grieving, okay? People find grieving so very difficult because it's an indicator that you've lost something that was so meaningful for you. That's why when people don't win the Stanley Cup or the SHL or something like that, that they're in tears. It means so much to them in terms of that pursuit in that way. So you have to be somewhat prepared as an indicator that if you want to chase a dream or do something meaningful, it will have an aspect of difficulty, discomfort emotionally, and potentially grieving. You lose a loved one. It hurts so bad in grief because you love them so much. And so the suggestion then is, it's a pretty simple equation. It's very exact in a way that the pain is an indicator of how much that matters to you in that sense. So if you can almost, and there's a few other things that I could talk about as techniques, if you can rationally look at the emotional situation you have, you can interpret it in a way with distance potentially. The one question to ask yourself is, this is uncomfortable, this is painful. In 2 years, how much will I think about how much this was uncomfortable at that stage? In the long span of life, this moment will last for the next half hour at least, but this is only half an hour out of 50 years of living or whatever sort of idea in that sense. Another way to distance or make that rational is, as funny as it sounds, is to distance yourself into a third person perspective. So I've talked about self-talk before. If you talk to yourself in the third person, or you explain your emotions to yourself by using your name like a third person, that element of distance that you have has been shown in research to work as like a good coach or as a friend to yourself. We listen to others and we take advice from other people better than we do from our own self. The flip side, we are most mean to ourselves. We say things to ourselves that we would never dream of saying to somebody else in that sense. So if you can think about your emotional experience and take a bigger perspective on it, and even sometimes evaluate it from a detached third-person point of view, you can interpret the stressful situation in a way that puts it into perspective, as a cliche again. All right? So that's where I think it makes more sense now. Getting comfortable with being uncomfortable relates to putting it into perspective. Accepting this is what's going on now, not fighting it, but telling yourself, I feel this way because it's usually an equation, a result of another more positive side. I feel pain because I feel love in that sense. I care so much, which is why I'm so upset when I don't get my way. And that's why if we can keep that in perspective, that helps. Okay? And this also relates, you're saying, oh, that sounds easy, rationally. Our personality does influence how we regulate our emotions. Okay? And we can see the good, the bad, and the ugly in sport in terms of emotional expression. And one role of research that we did was looking at how perfectionism, a coach's level of perfectionism, how that relates to the type and how effective they are at regulating their emotions generally in that sense. And so what we find, perhaps not too surprisingly, and this sort of divides up perfectionism, do I need to be perfect for myself or do I need to be perfect for other people? And those are two very different things. Similarly then, do I expect other people to be perfect because I have high standards or because I think it's good for them as well? And so you could imagine then the high level of perfectionist coaches who have to be good and want other people to be good for other people, they are the worst at trying to regulate their emotions. Interestingly, what they often do is they use suppression as an emotion regulation strategy. They try not to show it until they think it's an okay time to let it out in that sense. You can kind of almost see it in this coach here. He starts with the suppression, I shouldn't, and then he just lets go in an explosion that way. He can't contain it because, as you see, there's so much energy physiologically that it just starts coming out in that way. You know? And again, if you think about the body images, you can see this is all red and the eye and that sort of, yes, exactly. There's a lot of muscle tension going on there. And I'd wonder where his hands are in that sense as well. Okay? But there is a cost to suppressing your emotions. It takes energy to suppress the energy in that sense. So we see it in cardiovascular disease, we see it in muscle tension, things like that as well. And that has long-term implications that leads to emotional exhaustion, which is where I was going with that as well. Okay? And so this is an area of research that I've been doing for a long time. Back when I was in the UK, Athletics Weekly talked to me about how coaches are burning out because back then, they don't even have the life balance in that sense. There's a conflict between regulating emotions of feeling guilt and shame and sadness from being away from the family to go to competitions where they then don't feel that they are good enough either when they are coaching as well. They're fatigued and have too much emotional exhaustion. Similarly, this is a recent chapter we wrote, the fear of failure, that I'm not good enough, and admittedly this is with athletes. It prompts preparation to be better because I don't want to fail, but it's unsustainable. It leads to overtraining, overreaching, and as a result of that, fear of failure in the long run leads to emotional exhaustion and burnout in that sense. And so that's similarly what we've noticed is missing in the research with coaches. There's a lot more on athletes. And if you are interested, I'm quite happy to share a book that I edited a few years ago. I can send you an e-copy of it if you send an email to me at the end. Don't tell the publisher, okay? But yeah, there's a lot of different chapters relating to other aspects of coaching and psychological side of management and things there that relate to self-development, self-regulation also. Okay? So the flip side, if I've told you, well, suppression's not good, how do we express emotions effectively? Language. The words we use are very important for us to make sense of our emotions. If we can name it, if we can label it, we can start to understand it. So I appreciate, this was the first Inside Out movie a few years ago. There was a new one that just came out, which is a lot of fun as well. I took my son to watch it, and the child is now, she's a puberty-aged girl going to ice hockey camp and all the rest, which was perfect because my son was off to ice hockey as well. But this actually, to be fair, it is based on psychology research as well. You'll see shortly that these are the basic emotions that we can then pull apart. But you can see we start to better understand these emotions by using imagery or by relating them to symbols and things of that nature as well. So even better, this is what we call emotional granular, you break it down. So again, actually, as I said, this is in the research. These 5 guys and girls are here in the middle. So you have fearful, you have angry, disgust even, sadness, happy, surprise, and bad. And what we find, and I used to work back in Canada, I did my undergraduate, we pay for tuition. So I had to make money, and what I basically did was an aspect of social work where I would work with children who were young offenders, who were in care of the state and foster parents and things of that nature. And so I was working doing sport programs one-to-one with them to help them to experience aspects of life in a more safe sort of situation, and using sport with all of its emotional aspects to sort of help them understand how they felt. So the thing at the beginning was, he would talk to some children, how do you feel? The extent of their vocabulary to understand their emotions was bad, good. And if that's all you feel, then you can't explore or do anything when you don't know exactly what aspect of bad it is. So actually, funny enough, bad is still here, but bad then relates to, well, are you bored? Do you feel bad because you've got too much on because you're busy, because you're stressed, because you're tired? There's a big difference between being stressed and bored, but you've labeled it as bad, okay? Well, now we know which we should work on if that's the case. So that's what we're talking about here is, if your child comes home, how was school today? Good. You can, yeah. You can then start to, okay, where did that pull on in that sense?
I want that on my fridge.
Well, yes, you know. And when we at least start to be able to label the emotions, we understand what they mean, we understand the physiology, the thoughts, and the social aspects that might relate to these emotions as well. And so we, again, keep hitting you with the research. We looked at and proposed a program that is called written emotional disclosure. Interestingly, it was originally developed with university students, but it has now been adapted to every aspect of life. So cancer diagnosis, grief, job loss, very limited, but what it has been done in sport is with injury. What you are asked to do, typically, it's been adapted, is you write on 3 occasions, maybe separated by a day or 2, that sort of thing. And you are asked to write any thoughts, feelings, emotions that you have about the injury you sustained. Write for 20 minutes typically, just anything that comes out about the experience of the injury. So as a result of that, what we find, and I did it for part of my PhD, and actually we did this about how do athletes adapt to the COVID-19 pandemic, okay? All of a sudden, the Olympics are canceled. I'm not going to live my dream that I've trained for my life. That's not happening is a sort of thing, initially, in that sense. I can't train with my teammates. How am I going to adapt to that, and that sort of thing? Okay, and then it moved on. Now I actually, okay, the airport is open. The Olympics is on again, a year later. But I have to go to qualifying tournaments and travel on airplanes and wear masks and do all that sort of thing. I'm a bit anxious about that. So we propose this as a way of dealing with the psychological trauma of the COVID-19 pandemic. And what we find works best is if in the first time you do the writing, you just let out all of the emotions, express them, release any pent-up suppression of the emotion that you've already had. This is good because this is a place where typically the instructions are, it's just, you know, nobody's going to read this. Just write whatever your darkest thoughts, just let it out. Don't feel guilty. Don't worry about your grammar, just let it out. If they do that the first time, the second time, the best is if they make sense of it, okay? Now we would like you to consider, okay, you had this emotional response. What are some of the reasons in that sense? And we do actually look at, through linguistic analysis, we can put the words through software for one of my studies. And we see that people who get the best experience out of this are the ones where you see their writing change across the 3 times, where they use more words that relate to, by the 3rd time, because, therefore, they gain emotional insight. They make sense of the trauma, getting injured, or the COVID-19 pandemic. I understood the Olympics were shut down because it wasn't safe, we needed to, that sort of thing. They made sense of the emotions. I felt upset because my dreams had been crushed in that sort of idea. So they made sense of it. The 3rd time they write, it's best as if they're thinking for the future. How am I going to adapt and change based on what I have learned? So going through a process of understanding the emotions, making sense of them, and then forecasting, ideally with approach goals, of how we are going to adapt and move forward after this stressful experience. And we, like I said, we've seen this relate to changes in words. Another interesting aspect about changes in word use is if they go from, rather than only thinking about themselves or being more internalizing, if they think about themselves in a bigger perspective as well. And we can look at that in changes of the types of pronouns that they use and things of that nature as well. Yes, by all means.
Have you thought about how this can be used in a, like the Olympics is a long-term goal, but in a, like during a season? Because you can have so many games before the goal is to reach playoffs, but all the games on the road. So like for basketball, that's on the women's side 22 games per season. On the men's side, that's 32. In hockey, it's 56. Now, how to handle these emotions in after every game, because a lot of these emotions, I mean, as a coach and not as an RF-SISU person, the emotions are there directly after the game,
yes,
or mid-game in halftime or in the timeout, and to not look like that American football coach. That's the question.
Yeah, this and it kind of can be linked about how mindfulness is being used more and more in sport, and people think that, oh, mindfulness is, I have to sit on my meditation cushion for 20 minutes and it has to be dedicated time of that nature. That might be where you get the groundwork done, But actually where it happens more so is in the moment, where you recognize, okay, now I feel this. I'm not going to be judgmental about how I feel, but by recognizing it and knowing that it will pass, then that emotion will not build into something really big. So, like you said, you could do something similar to that in terms of even if it's post-game debrief. You could, as a coach, you could lead through this verbally to a degree. It's better if it's written, but it can also be done in terms of the process of disclosing, making sense, planning forward in that sense. So it doesn't have to be big T trauma. It can be smaller trauma in terms of, I just didn't make that good pass or something. I didn't run the play correctly in the last 20 seconds. And rather than going home and ruminating on that for the next 2 days, coming to practice the next time and still being pissed off that, I didn't perform, deal with it. And that's the other thing. It doesn't have to be done 3 times. Even if it's done once for a certain amount, that has a part-time benefit as well. So the nice thing is that you can adapt this. It has even been adapted to writing about best possible self as well, to use it in more positive emotions also. It's been shown that that's why I say typically it started with 20 minutes. They've seen that it still has benefits if you only write for 3 minutes. You still get that initial sort of unpacking, unblocking. You might not get the deep level of insight, but it has a benefit in that way. So it's the making sense of what I'm feeling, and it's in a more systematic way. That is an idea that, yeah. Okay? Because as I say, the implications then is this is a form of disclosure, it's letting it go, it's a healthy expression, and the opposite that I was talking about is suppression or repression, where the energy of the emotion, it's going to find an outlet, as we were looked at. What's interesting, and this is old research when I still had hair and I was doing my master's, was we looked at where does that energy go? And it most often goes in the one place you don't want it to. It's an ironic error, okay? Typically, particularly with, say, golf, if you're golf, the one thing you don't want to do is hit it into the lake. Last thing you think of right before you hit, just don't hit the lake, and it's planted as a thought. We find that people will go that direction even more if they're repressing anxiety, performance anxiety or anger, made too many putts on the last hole, still holding that, and they come with the tension, they think of the one thing. And we see it in a couple of different sports as well. So better to express, to then be able to move forward, using the energy, getting it out, and accepting it, moving on. Okay? But it's, as you see, it's complex in that we have a lot of emotions, potentially, but all of the emotions also have a level of intensity. How strong is that emotion? And this does relate to the labeling as well. So what I want you to do with your partner beside you, I'll give you an example first, but so if I say I have a little anger, what is a word that I might use or you might use to express to me you're feeling just a little angry at the moment? What's a word you might choose? Just to tell me that there's just something, just a 1 on a 5-point scale. This is 1 tiny bit, 5 off the chart. That's the top of the chart. A little bit of anger. Is there a word you can think of to express that? Yeah, på svenska with your partner is far, yeah. Yes, we have one? Yes? A little, yes, a bit, yes, okay. So I suggested that maybe it's just a little unsettled. I've got a little blip of energy. I know it's not good. I'm not content. Something's happening. I'm a little unsettled. Whatever. Other end of the spectrum, perhaps, if you think of it, I would say something like enraged. All right? So that's a 5 on the anger scale of feeling enraged. Okay, what I want you to do now, take your own piece of paper, keep it to yourself. I want you to fill in, på svenska, varsågod, that's probably most accurate. So you've got, agree what angry is between the two of you as an emotion. What I want you to come up with is 2, 3, and 4 on the scale. 3 more words that relate to anger on a 5-point scale in increasing intensity. Okay? So for the next one, maybe unsettled, for example, I might go unsettled. I don't want to prime you. You know, as actually I was going to, yes, exactly. Yes, no. Do it yourself. Come up with 3 more words that you would say on, for intensity levels. This is 1, 2, 3, 4 I want, and 5 is my equivalent of enraged. You pick 3 words, increasing intensity, that mean anger in a stronger way to you. I know it's tough because nobody in this room ever feels angry at all, do they? There's, you know. All I want, 3 words that reflect slightly increasing levels of anger. Don't share yet. I want your 3 answers down before you share.
Vilket är det du passar på mitten? Jo, men skriv.
Oh.
The grammar hasn't reached Dala eller vad.
So the opposite of...
Där.
You blow out. Okay, do we have our 3 intensities of yo? Okay, I want you to compare your list of 3 with the people beside you then. Yeah. Okay. Let's see how you did then. So out of 3 in your groups, did you get same words? 3 same words, all 3 same words. Anybody have 3 for 3? No? Anybody have 2 of the same words? So, yes, so you both used the same word, so we did have 2. Okay, and because I asked, do you have 1 of the same words between you? No? Okay.
Was it on the same place?
That's my next question. Did you, yeah, exactly. You used the same word, but was it 2, 3, or 4, if you had the order, if you remember? Do you understand my question? Did you both had the same word you suggested? Was it in the same place for the 2 of you? No. So you said the same word, but you meant something different in terms of intensity. Okay. So you're saying the same language, same words, but meaning something slightly different in that sense.
We only talk about words here.
Yes.
My eyes and my voice is loud when I'm angry.
Okay, this is a good point.
Body language is also a language form.
Yeah, this is true, but let's say you are a coach, you are with an athlete, and you are asking, okay, we're doing a drill, you know, and you can see they're struggling with it. Or they're on the pitch, and you can see they've made a few mistakes, and you can see they're getting a little more angry. And I check with them, and everybody has different body language. And I say, how are you feeling? And they say, I'm getting a little frustrated, coach. Okay, frustrated. They say, I'm frustrated. To me, frustrated is a 2. They're telling me, no, frustrated is a 4.5, maybe a 5 is what they're saying to me. And so unfortunately, that athlete continues on the play, and instead of me getting them off of the pitch, she's just frustrated, coach. No problem. She can stay on the pitch for a little longer.
Where are you finding these?
Yes.
What kind of brand?
Yeah. Oh, these are my own coaching experiences. Yes. Okay. So it's kind of my point here. It's important that, and no, you're right, absolutely. How you communicate exactly is that if you are talking to a player, communicating, trying to understand their emotions, we might be using the same words, but interpreting them in different places as well. But actually, a lot of us aren't even using the same words. The quality of the relationship that we have between the coach and the athlete has a lot of implications, and we've looked at this in terms of the emotional exhaustion that I was talking about earlier, as well as cognitive and physical performance. So the better quality relationship between the coach and the athlete, the less physical exhaustion they have and the less psychological exhaustion. Quality of relationship, we typically, very quickly, measure it on the closeness, the amount of care, the complementarity. Do you have sort of, do things in a way where you complement each other, you know, that doesn't have to be the same, but they go together well. That's where, and a good co-orientation. We're both aiming to go in the same place. We're oriented in a similar direction rather than the opposite would be going in 2 different directions. Another thing we can think about is commitment. Does the athlete feel that the coach is committed to them? Yes, that's a good relationship. If the coach or the athlete feels the other isn't very committed, that's not going to be such a good relationship. And so we have seen through research, experiments, that relates to the level of psychophysiological exhaustion, which relates to burnout in that sense. But this actually, we saw good things come out of that. Also, just to relate to it, is that similar to the emotional expression, there are different risk factors for different athletes based on the social support that they have, the different cultures that they have in terms of, might relate to expression and things of that nature as well, or personality variables. So things like I mentioned, perfectionism is a risk factor for burnout in that sense. Interestingly, narcissism can be an opposite actually in some sort of ways because they pick and choose and that sort of thing. Extroversion, introversion, all these different types of individual considerations. Age is a difference as well that might relate to burnout. And these are things that coaches can be aware of that we found in our research. Okay? Yes, by all means.
Some of the points on the last one we had
Yep.
are, I was going to say, diversity questions.
Yes, exactly. Very good. Yes, to raise that longer.
Did you look at any other diversity aspects like gender?
Gender was one of the differences, yes. And there was a risk one way or the other, but I don't want to say it because there was, but I can't say which way it was off the top of my head. Yes.
And did you look at when it's intersection?
Male coach or...
Separate, so like
those.
A female coach with a bad psychosocial situation, but maybe social cultural.
This was actually, this one we looked more at the athletes in that sense. We carved up the athletes, not the coaches, and looked at the different sort of distant differences within the athletes who are more prone that way. But this is informing coaches that way. But you're right, we also need to look at the different coach characteristics as well, which is leading me on to my next point as well. No, exactly. Is that, again, you've got more indications of coaches not coaching so well. Coaches, as much as we are talking about athletes, yes, slowed down for effect, yes. Coaches will also have intense emotions as well. And so we need to be aware of those so we can help coaches also. And so that is a program of research that we have just finished recently, again, funded by Centrum für Idrottsforskning. Your money's going to good places. And even more, to your cultural point, I developed the assessment of coach emotions, the ACE, with a team based in, I did the data collection partially in the UK. They were all based in Canada. I came to Sweden and realized that there are some cultural differences even between Canada, UK, and Sweden as well. And realized that this is an observational tool where we would watch coaches and indicate the degree of anger that they had, the degree of being alert, being supportive. We have categories that we look at and then measure how much the coach expresses their emotion. What I realized was, well, there's one glaring obvious thing, as we've highlighted, is there's differences in language. So we can't just do Google Translate words for words and then say, this is what we are seeing in the coaches in Sweden. So what we have been through is a whole process of, in the classroom initially, I did the cases where we did one translation to another translation with students back and forth and to see how much difference there was. We interviewed 5 youth level coaches to what emotions are you having with your athletes, so we knew, are they similar to the ones that were there previously? And then we started to put together the different categories of the emotions they had and pilot them as well. So within, I have to submit my report this month later, it's ready, it's done, but I would say the month after, if you would like a copy of the ACEs, then we can send you that for use with your coaches to understand, help them understand how they're expressing their emotions with their athletes. Okay, so that is a tool that will have made available. Unfortunately then in the UK, they have a Sports Coach UK, and that sort of research that I just showed, they summarized and put into their, disseminated to their coaching education as well, which I can get you a copy of what the UK interpreted of my research relating to that as well. But as we've highlighted, there might be cultural differences in that sense to be mindful of. Okay, so that's one type of tool, but to bring it back maybe to you personally, just so I'm aware that you probably do want some things that you can use more concretely. When we talked about emotional experiences, we can either try and suppress them and not admit them, or we can go through a process of accepting them, being aware of them, and trying to use them in a more positive way and not be so critical with ourselves, and a bit more kindness even to the emotional experiences that we had. So one form, I don't know if anybody's seen this one before as well, is the acronym of RAIN that relates to self-compassion. So when we have an emotional experience, the first thing is the awareness. What am I feeling right now? And obviously this is for yourself, so the label that you have is the one that is most meaningful to you. All right, so at least now I know what I'm working with. Rather than fight it or suppress it, is to say, okay, it's here, rather than use the energy to try and get rid of it. And then that leads you to the point of, okay, well, why? What is this in that sense? What is the source? What is making me feel this particular way? And the idea, and this is the N, has been used in a couple of different ways, and it does come from sort of Buddhist meditation practices, is that thoughts are thoughts, they are not yourself. Yeah. I'm not angry, it is just how I feel this moment, in that sort of idea. It kind of relates to the distancing I was talking about earlier as well. But that can be, you are not your emotions, your self-worth, oh, I'm a bad person, I feel angry, in that sense. You try and nurture it in terms of, well, in this moment, how would you want to be? What would it look like? What are the behaviors that I was talking about that would help you nurture a more positive, accepting, sort of compassionate self-care response? Not to say, I shouldn't feel angry and suppress it, but to go, okay, where did that come from? You know, there's something that's stimulated that as a point. So we are forced, we are engaged in the world. We cannot always choose who we meet on a day-to-day basis, or our interactions with other people, or other people's driving and how they are very inconsiderate and cause us to almost have crashes, things like that. But as it said, I think Viktor Frankl in that sense, in terms of the space in between is where we have control, and through training and awareness and recognizing what it is, we can grow and have more autonomy and go in a direction that we would like to in terms of being our best self. So it's this point in between of, rather than stimulus reaction, it's a response that goes in the direction that we want to. Hopefully an approach goal rather than an avoidance goal. Because as I was saying earlier, approach is more positive, pleasant emotions, healthy. Avoidance goals is fearful, negative, and it's always a running away from something. And we can often have things interpreted in two different ways there. So if we can do that, and we can be our best selves, we then have the opportunity to extend it to other people as well. Okay? But it starts with getting your own self together in that sense. Be the Gandhi, be the change you want to see in the world. It starts with the me, and then through the connection connects with the we. Okay? And that, as I think, would maybe pose the sort of discussion point that I would sort of lead you to either reflect on, or I'm not sure how it would work online, but in terms of thinking to yourself, well, what are the emotion regulation strategies I use for myself? When I feel the way I don't want to feel, what am I currently doing to make myself feel better? Do I have emotion regulation strategies to bring myself back to where I want to be? We probably are doing them to a degree we might not be aware of. And then the other flip side, and in different roles in our life that we have, what sort of interpersonal emotion regulation strategies do I use? I see a friend who is sad, who is grieving. How do I try and help regulate their emotions? We don't like to see other people in pain. We often we get more active about helping other people's pain more than our own selves in that way. What are some of the things that you do, and in the science world we would say, for interpersonal emotion regulation? And these are some things that we can reflect on or discuss depending on Kero in terms of how you want to take the time. All right? So with your partners, think about your own techniques, strategies, things that work for your own emotion regulation, and things that might work in terms of interpersonal, other people's, how you might try and influence others' emotions. Coaching is a lot of doing that with other people. Okay? So take a moment between you.
Jag tror jag försöker. kulturhandel.
Ja, men också det jag tänker att för bara här är att man kan känna att man kan ställa om. För vi har ju liksom visat att nu har jag hållit på här idag, men jag tycker att de amerikanska, de vet att det här är just fan. Alltså de kan inte ändå skälla ut mig för fel sak.
Ja.
Alltså, du kanske slutar på mig för att du inte får skälla ut din chefskollega för att du kommer sluta spela. Så de har ett helt annat, men när vi har juniorer som piss åt sig, fast jag skiter i, så kan vi gå det. Och då tappar vi ju och ofta det kan jag säga för att det känns skrivet så ofta så är det så här. En grej händer, nästa grej händer, kvällen, och sen så händer tredje, fjärde, femte på kort tid. Och så bara, och det jag ser att så här efter jag bara, ja, jag och dottern har exakt samma känsla. Men hon är skillnad. Och jag kunde inte vara segregerad för att jag inte stannade upp i 1, 2, 3 och ens reflekterade över att så här.
Det kommer fram.
Och sen till slut har jag 6 misstag som har hänt. Som ska ut samtidigt. Och där man verkligen liksom vem man är, vem är jag?
Men det är kul också liksom om vi idrottare pratar. Alltså, det är ju hård match och så här i basket och fotboll och vad det är. Hos mig är det inte så. Det står ju en lag den där på bana 10 och en som på bana 5 och 7. Jag kan sköta dem i klass. Det är ju sen efter så bara gått upp att man tar. Så det är inte olika.
Men hur gör ni? Coachar ni i det? För det är eller tennisen, det sitter ju inte coach med så det minns vi också. Och då är det ju mer såhär, om jag lämnar över allt till idag så har vi och jag som kan vara. Jag ska göra nu är det sant och där vi är ju läsa om teknism och sådär. Pratas ju om det där är en matchcoach och en träningscoach. En dålig matchcoach. Alltså som sätter vare sig du vill vara matchcoach så sätter det krav. Alltså det är en test på att man läser så dålig från alltså
Och skytte får vi inte ta kontakt. Skytte om man frågar den som är får jag han frågar och säger tillbaka som ingenting annat. När det startar då är skytten en sak. Sen kan ju coachen stå där bakom och man kan vända sig om och ha ögonkontakt med den influensen.
men då är det ju också
Ja, precis. Ja. Men annars så det är jätteolika. Det är kul också.
Okay, I will just bring us back to wrap up so that I can give Karo some time to take care of the housekeeping, clean up my mess. Yes? Okay. So I was asking you to think of some emotion regulation strategies, approaches, things that you do for yourself and for others. But I don't want that to be an extra pressure on you thinking, oh, I really should be doing more of this and I'm not doing this well enough. Because the thing is that some days your best will look different than other days. We have, as I mentioned, physiological demands, we have cognitive strain, we have difficult emotions, and sometimes things like outcomes in terms of our patients, things like that will be impacted depending on what we've already had to deal with during the day. And so the idea of compassion is being a little more kind and gentle with yourself, that we're all got our own bags to carry, that it's difficult some days. So be gentle with yourself, at least how you would be with others in that sense. All right, and I think that then is enough from me. Just to say from Norrland, from Västerbotten, tack så mycket. Thank you for having me on your beautiful island of Gotland. Tack så mycket. Thank you. Oh, thank you.
jag ska ta över den där också. Det var kvällens föreläsning. Jag ska lite snabbt hitta vilken sån här port jag ska använda. Av oklar anledning så hittar man aldrig det i tid. Why don't I know what to use? Där. Då ska vi se. Sen den tar över. Did it work? Did I do it? It blinked here. Ja, bra. Det jag ska säga från RF-SISU-håll, tack så jättemycket till Paul givetvis för dessa 2 lärorika tillfällen att både få lära oss mer men också få reflektera och förstå strategier och få faktiskt ökad kunskap i vad forskning visar, samtidigt som du har väldigt många levande exempel på saker som jag tror att många kan känna igen sig i mycket saker. Och så givetvis roliga tävlingar mitt i allting som uppskattas. Från RF-SISUs håll så tycker vi att det är viktigt att vi kan jobba vidare med frågan efter. Och det här är lite material eller utbildningar som vi har. Och jag tänkte säga att Thomas Nilsson är ju en mänsklig människa, inte ett material. För att kunna jobba vidare med just den här frågan. Vare sig det är på ledare till ledarnivå eller om det är mot styrelser eller organisationer som kan påverka och bidra med stress eller påverka för att kunna minska stress i livet som ledare. Samla ledarteamet är ett material som vi har. Jag har lite broschyrer som man kan titta igenom där. Ledare i fokus är ett digitalt verktyg som man kan använda. Mental träning, där har vi Thomas Nilsson som samarbetar med oss på RF-SISU Gotland för att kunna hjälpa både tränare men även ledare inom idrottsrörelsen på Gotland för att kunna få ökad kunskap. Och jag tänker till exempel med Rain eller hur jag går från att sätta ord på mina känslor i stora missade mål med trauman och sånt till den här vardagssituationen då. Och framtidens ledarskap är en satsning där vi satsar på unga ledare som vi tänker ska vara med i det långa loppet, och vi vill ge goda förutsättningar för att de ska kunna ha ett hållbart ledarskap över tid. Kommande föreläsningar från RF-SISU, lite snabbt uppradat här, finns på vår hemsida under utbildningar också. Alla de här ligger just nu tillgängliga att anmäla sig till. Jag slår ett slag för 12/10, Stora mensdagen kallar vi den. Där vi har 3 föreläsare som kommer prata om menstruationscykeln från pubertet till hela vägen in i klimakteriet. Och hur dessa olika faser i livet påverkar träning. Där kan man vara med på en eller alla 3 föreläsningar eller 2 om man vill. Den kommer också vara digital och går att anmäla sig till på RF-SISUs hemsida. Utvärdering för denna kvällsföreläsning. QR-kodaren, eller så kommer den ut i mailform också efter det här. Uppskattas väldigt mycket så vi vet om Paul gjorde ett bra jobb tänkte jag säga. Men också om det var ett ämne som var intressant eller om det är något vi behöver fördjupa oss mer i eller om det finns andra perspektiv som ni skulle vilja att vi lyfter så att vi kan hitta värdefulla föreläsningar för ledarna på Gotland. Thank you very much for your time, Paul. And for coming all the way. Titta!
Oh, that's good.
Perfect timing! I did it. Ja, och tack för att ni tog er tid ikväll för att vara med. Tack så mycket. Tackar.